Good evening, everyone. Chip Cooper for FTC Guardian and my partner, Alan Cutts. Here we are, closing in on the end of October 2018. And by the same token, we're getting close to closing in on the end of our entire series on GDPR. In fact, I'm looking at my screen right now, we're at GDPR 9, and we've only got maybe one or two more, and we're sort of at a pause and can then focus exclusively on FTC stuff. And I'll be very happy to do that as well. I'm sort of burning out on GDPR right now. But anyway, we promised we would cover it, and we're going to stay with it. Now, in terms of what's going on personally, we always give you a little bit of information about what we're up to. This is a big deal for me coming up this weekend. I'm on Amelia Island in Florida, and the big game, football game of the year is in Jacksonville, which is about 30 miles south of here. And it's a very unusual football game between Georgia and Florida. It's like a bowl game. It's not a home game for either party or either team. In fact, they divide the stadium down the middle, and it's half and half. So it's very unusual, and it's a nasty rivalry. And I believe College Game Day is going to be there. And so we always have 30, 40 people over for ribs and barbecue to watch the game. So I'm sort of getting ready to do that. It's a big deal. I worry about it every year because I think maybe one year I'm going to burn the ribs or do something bad that I've never done. And all these people are sitting around looking at me. What are we going to eat for the tailgate thing? We're not tailgating. We're watching TV, but it's a simulated tailgate. Anyway, that's what I'm heading up for. Alan, what are you up to before we get into the slides here?
I had a really big weekend last week. A lot of folks in town for just friends. Everybody, just a lot of people congregated on our house. We had 4 couples staying with us, and out of it all, I ended up with a pickup. So I now, besides having 2 SUVs, I've got a pickup. So I'm a man again. I feel
just leave it there and let you have it.
Yeah, I bought it from him. His father had one, and he bought it from him. So he didn't use his for a trade-in. So he just said, "Do you want it?" I said, "Yeah, man. If you're going to get rid of it, I want it." It's a 2008 pickup, 4 cab, double cab, bed, long bed, short bed, whatever. So I said, "I'll take it, man." So I was like, I feel good again. I've got a pickup, a big pickup,
a big one.
I
saw in Texas when I was there a couple of months ago.
Yep.
Everybody else had a pickup truck except me, and I had a rental
car. You can put your car in the back of most of our pickups in Texas.
Yeah, at least it wasn't a sedan. It was at least a 4-door Jeep. But everybody else had the big cab, whatever pickups. Okay, so I guess we need to get started here.
Yep.
So I'm going to share my screen, and I see the title slide there. So you tell me if you can see it.
Yes, I can.
All right, so you already know we're at GDPR 9, so let's get started. And of course, as a housekeeping announcement, the presentation is for informational purposes only. It is not legal advice, and we're not affiliated with the Federal Trade Commission. Again, you see that as part of the title slide, and you see the entire list of the GDPR-related hangouts we've had. We're on number 9, data security, so we tried to cover the waterfront, and as indicated just a minute ago, there's probably going to be 2 more, and that's it for a long time. We're getting close. All right, so let's move ahead. What is data security? I think we probably already know, but it's good to start off with a definition just to make sure we're on the right track. This is taken from wikipedia.com. Data security means protecting digital data, of course, from destructive forces and from unwanted actions or unauthorized users. And here are the 2 general things we're protecting against: cyber attack, which means a malicious destruction or corruption of data, or a data breach, and that typically involves access of data for purposes of, financial gain, selling data, credit card information, all that sort of thing. So that is a very important part of GDPR. And of course, that's what we're going to be talking about in this presentation, at least in terms of what GDPR requires regarding data security. Let's look at the actual statutory language of GDPR regarding data security. And up first is Article 32, titled Security of Processing. And it's very important to see that highlighted cost of implementation on the right end of the first line, because you guys are mostly small businesses, and you don't have the millions of dollars that the larger companies are spending on data security. So at least there is a consideration that cost of implementation is a reasonable factor to consider in connection with how you go about data security. So taking into account the state of the art, the cost of implementation, and the nature, scope, and context and purposes of processing, as well as the risk of varying likelihood and severity of the rights and freedoms of natural persons, the controller and the processor shall implement, and here's the key, appropriate technical and organizational measures to ensure a level of security appropriate to the risk. So look at the two parts of that underlying text, which are important, and we're going to give more information about these two aspects: technical measures and organizational measures, and we'll deal with those hopefully in a context that's more applicable to small business than big business in the next few minutes. All right, the related article is Article 33, involving notifications of data breach, because if you're processing data of EU data subjects and there's a data breach, you've got an obligation to notify. So the controller shall, without undue delay, and where feasible, not later than 72 hours after having become aware of it, notify the personal data breach to the supervisory authority, et cetera, et cetera. And then for the processor, the time period for notification is without undue delay, you see. So with respect to controllers, not later than 72 hours after becoming aware. For processors, without undue delay. So those are the time frames that are required. Now, there's a lot of information available for, I guess, consumption, study, consumption, consideration regarding data protection relative to GDPR compliance. We don't have the time to go through all of that, but what we have here is an infographic that I'm going to bounce around in and give you a quick overview of the process. And as we go through this, you're going to be saying, my goodness, this is something that Microsoft might do, but not in a small company like mine, right? And you'd be right about that. But at least I'm going to give you the process here in terms of this infographic that a larger company will go through. And then I'm going to show you a couple of things that are probably more applicable and more tailored to small businesses, which of course would be the typical member here for us at FTC Guardian. All right, number one, research to understand your firm's exact responsibilities related to the regulation. Number two, complete a risk assessment. Very simply, find out what the risks are. Number three, understand whether you need to appoint a DPO or data protection officer. You as a small business will not have that concern at all, so skip number three. Number four, identify the biggest areas of risk and prioritize systems and hold sensitive personal information. Number five, speak to experts and make use of advisory services. In other words, hire a consultant, which again, small businesses are probably not in a condition to do or position to do. Number six, create an action plan which lays out the tasks you need to complete. Number seven, investigate innovative and specialist technology and select a solution. Number eight, use a data removal solution to strip files of sensitive metadata before they're uploaded. Number nine, identify a solution that can help assess the risks, etc. Number 10, educate your staff and employees. That's a lot. And this sort of thing has been going on in corporate America for the last 2 years. And the bigger companies have spent millions of dollars going through this process with respect to data processing. So that gives you an overview of what the big guys are doing. But what about you? What about small businesses? Because that's who we are here at FTC Guardian. It's important then to look at another GDP article, this one being Article 32. Well, wait a minute. We're going back. I was getting ahead of myself. What I want to do is to emphasize what I've emphasized before, that at least in this Article 32, the cost of implementation is at least one of the considerations. And for you as a small business, it should be a huge consideration. So this is where I thought I was with this additional Article 28 regarding outsourcing, because you can outsource to a fairly significant extent some of the data security responsibilities that you have. And here is a brief description of what your outsourcing responsibilities are as a controller. Where processing is to be carried out on behalf of a controller, the controller shall use only processors, and they would be outsourced service providers, known as processors, providing sufficient guarantees to implement appropriate, and here we get these two factors again, technical and organizational measures to protect data, right? So one way to solve the problem, or to at least take steps towards solving it, would be to outsource to a service provider who has all of this data security in place and these two aspects, technical and organizational measures. So let's take a look at that and look at three areas that would apply to just about any small business. And here they are. And I'm going to say here, as you can see, the parentheses there, I think what I'm about to present to you here is very reasonable in connection with a limited amount of time, effort, and money being spent by a small business. I believe what I'm presenting is reasonable, but I can make no guarantees, because there's no literature, there's no guidance in GDPR specifically for small businesses. It's just that we have one consideration, which is cost, among a lot of others. So I think I've had to do a lot of sort of thinking about this to try to come up with what I think is a reasonable approach, and here it is. So number one, there would be hosting, where you outsource to a GDPR compliant service provider, right? So they're going to be GDPR compliant and you outsource to them. The second aspect would be cloud storage. And again, you could outsource to a GDPR compliant service provider that would have data security protocols in place, right? And then number three, we get back to the data security policy, and way back in February of this year, we introduced the second of two data security policies. More again on that in just a few minutes, but you can add to the data security policy breach notice instructions and a password policy. And you see the last bullet there, that this is going to happen in a future member Hangout. I'm going to go into these two security policies and add that language for you, so that you can then generate a replacement security policy for yourself. And you see there in yellow these two elements that we've just talked about before: the technical, which involve hosting and cloud storage, and the organizational, which is your data security policy. So this, I think, is about the bare minimum that you might consider in terms of data security, but I believe it's reasonable for small businesses. So let's drill down just a little bit into these three aspects. Number one, hosting. And I went to the AWS, Amazon Web Services website, and they, in several places, but here's a clip taken from one of them where they say they are GDPR ready. And you can't see the date probably on this slide, but it's dated March 26th of this year, prior to the effective date of GDPR on May 25. And then you see the text here: today I'm pleased to announce that AWS services comply with the GDPR. And you remember in one of the prior slides, we discovered that a controller needs to essentially vet its service providers to make sure that they are compliant. And we'd have to just assume, I guess, AWS is, because they're sort of the gold standard of hosting service providers. All the major corporations, or almost all of them, use them. But, you know, here it is, a statement that they are compliant. And there's a lot of information on their website about what they do. And so that might be part of your vetting plan or process to make sure that AWS is compliant, and therefore you've complied with that part of the regulations. But then probably HostGator is more scaled down to the small business market than AWS, certainly in terms of price. And here is a YouTube video, And if you're interested in this, just search on YouTube, is HostGator GDPR compliant? And this little 6-minute video will pop up. And the reviewer, who is not a HostGator person or employee, the viewer says that HostGator is compliant and gives a lot of information. I watched part of that video, not the whole thing, but there's also, as indicated up in the subhead at the top of this slide, I was really impressed by the guy doing this vlog post regarding HostGator for data security, because he had an excellent endorsement disclosure, and the endorsement was related to the fact that he got some sort of a discount for his own hosting by HostGator for doing this endorsement, right? And so, as you know from prior Hangouts, if you're getting some kind of payment or a remuneration or financial benefit, you've got to disclose it according to the Federal Trade Commission. So at the very beginning of this video, he says, I want to disclose, I got a discount of X dollars or whatever, and I'm doing it. It's perfect. So if you're looking for a perfect example, in my opinion, of how to handle an endorsement disclosure on a YouTube video, then that's a really good reason to search for this one and actually see how it's done. I think it's excellent. All right, number 2, cloud storage. And you see there, number 1, Dropbox is certainly the best known. It's been around for a long time. It's the leader, but they've had some issues. Back in 2016, there was a data breach. And if you do some research on Dropbox in terms of data security, there are some critics out there of Dropbox. Now, obviously, the critics have a lot to do with, or a lot of concern regarding the data breach back in 2016. But now we're at the end of 2018, and the last 2 years are like, much longer in terms of data security years than just regular years, because there's a lot that's happened in the last 2 years. My guess is that Dropbox has significantly strengthened its data security protocols since 2016, particularly in view of the data breach at that time. And I did go to their website and do a little research, and I noted that they have some options that you can opt into for enhanced security. So if you're wedded to Dropbox, it's probably okay. You should consider the enhanced security options. However, the other ones, pCloud, Google Drive, Box, OneDrive, and MediaFire, are all generally regarded as having better data security protocols than Dropbox, generally speaking. That's a matter of opinion. I did some research, and that's sort of what I came up with. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that you drop Dropbox. You need to understand there's criticism out there. Consider the enhanced security options, but the others are generally considered stronger in terms of data security. And then number 3, data security policy. Again, we've talked about this in a prior Hangout earlier this year, February 2018 to be precise. And we introduced at that time a new developmental security policy intended to be a beginning approach for very small businesses. We also had already had at that time sort of a mid-range data security policy for a more mature business. So we wanted to get you started with the developmental. That was new back in February. And what I'm going to do, you see there in the last bullet, I'm going to update those 2 policies with a password policy and the information about data breach notice requirements in terms of instructions for compliance with GDPR. We'll probably have very early next year a Hangout after I add that language, and then you can go update those data security policies, and at least they will have language in those that are GDPR specific for purposes of compliance with the data security requirements. Okay, the takeaways then. Data security involves protecting data from cyber attack and data breach. The 2 important aspects of GDPR compliance for data security involve technical and organizational measures. And you can see there at the end of that second bullet, there's at least the consideration in GDPR that cost may be considered as a factor to balance out the other requirements. And in terms of the breach notice, controllers give 72 hours after awareness, processors without undue delay. And these then are the three aspects that we need to focus on for the small business approach. Again, no guarantees. First is hosting service provider, GDPR compliant, cloud storage service provider number 2. Again, find one that you believe is vetted to be GDPR compliant. And then number 3, when we get around to having our updated data security policies, we'll announce it in a Hangout early next year, and you can update your data security policy there for GDPR compliance purposes. All right, the tags that I'm going to put up early tomorrow morning: GDPR, data security, cyber attack, hosting, cloud storage, data security policy, password policy, and breach notification. So that is it for this presentation, which I think is a good thing, because by my watch, we're around 20 minutes, and we've gone longer than that on the last few Hangouts. And so we want to get back to our 15 or 20-minute time limit here. This is not a webinar, right? It's a very tailored presentation. So do we have any questions there, Alan? Do you see anything?
Yeah, one question that we have, and if you could maybe send me, they want a link to the infographic that you used in the slide. So if you send me, I'm sure you have it on your hard drive or something. You have it somewhere.
I've got it in the folder here of materials I used for this.
Yeah, just send me a link to it, or send it to me. Just add it.
I've got a clip of the actual infographic. I can just email it to you.
Yeah, email it to me, and I'll attach it to this Hangout under the GDPR section.
All right.
So the everybody will have access to the. Everyone will have access in the member area.
Any other questions?
No, that was the only question. Guys, if you have any questions, now's a good time to ask, whether it's specifically about this. Make sure you put it in the question. If you scroll down to where the questions are, where the chat is. If you click on the little 3 dots next to the chat, there's a place where you can send it as a question or as a chat. And if it's a question, just send it as a question so that we have it. I don't have anything else coming through. Give it a couple of minutes. Norm, somebody just posted, I found it. Somebody at Scoop, whatever, but we'll put it inside our.
Yeah, I'll give Alan the.
That way it's accessed. Everybody, all members will have access to it when they access the Hangouts, so it's fine. What about GoDaddy? Maybe send me a link to that video as well, the GoDaddy video.
You mean the host?
That's not GoDaddy. They said, what about GoDaddy? Maybe send me a link. Do you have a link to that?
The HostGator slide?
The HostGator thing?
Yeah, I can look it up again. And
yeah, just send me a link to it. I'll post it in just so they have a.
Yeah, it is a terrific example of a very, very well done endorsement disclosure. Among other things, of giving you arguments that HostGator is compliant. But
yeah. So for you ask, what about GoDaddy? I don't know what you really mean about that, because you just asked the question, what about GoDaddy? And then Rolf, is it wise not to sync files to Dropbox due to potential security breaches? I use Dropbox all the time.
I do too.
We use them between each other all the time. So, we're big. Matter of fact, I use Dropbox more than I use Google Docs, just because I pay for Dropbox and I can put all my files on it. I use Dropbox for Word docs and Excel and stuff like that, but that's what I use more than anything. Here's one from Phil. If you're storing sensitive data with a cloud provider, it is recommended that you encrypt that data. Use top-of-the-line encryption solution. Lowers your risk of exposure, sensitive data. Well, everybody can read it. He's just stating a fact, so everybody can read that there.
Yeah, I mean, basically, this person is giving an opinion. And we would never say, no, it's not, you shouldn't do that. Obviously, if you are encrypting data at rest, obviously when it's being processed, it's in RAM, right?
Yeah.
But when it's at rest, it's then on the hard drive again. And the classic is 256-bit. That's even better. So if that's how your data is being archived, you're taking an additional step. I'm not sure that that's absolutely necessary from the small business perspective, but I think it's a very good thing to do.
Yep. Yep. Okay. We don't really have anything else. It's almost 8:30. What's that?
I'm sorry. Because I just remembered when you read that very quickly that the person said for sensitive data. So
Yep.
if it's very sensitive personal data, health information, all sorts of other financial, that sort of thing, it's probably required.
Yep.
But for regular data, probably not.
Okay. Great. Yeah, we don't really have any other questions, so I don't see anything else coming in. So, guys, look forward to seeing you in November. We don't have the dates yet. We'll have them tomorrow, I guess. Chip and I will get together for the dates for November. We haven't come up with those. Matter of fact, we'll probably just do November and December, so we know what all the dates are for the end of through the end of the year, so we know what they are. Because I know I'm traveling in November and in December, so we'll have to kind of work around that schedule. So, all right, guys, thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you on the next Hangout.
Good evening, everyone.
All right, bye-bye.